So I want to thank you for coming. I'm Robin Hiller. I'm the Executive Director of Voices for Education. And we work on a lot of things that we think will make schools better. And it's sometimes easier to talk about what we don't like, which is high-stakes testing and overcrowded classrooms and the Common Core. But there's this movement across the country right now that has to do with high-stakes testing. And last spring I was so depressed about all these testings. My grandson is in third grade, and it was Ames, and he had 107 pages of test questions over 3 days. This is, if you're applying to law school, if you're trying to pass the Arizona bar, it's 2 days. If you're going into medical school, it's a half a day. And they're giving these sweaty little third graders 3 days of tests. It's just ridiculous. So across the country, there's this movement to stop the insanity with the high-stakes testing, because what the research says is they do no good. The only good they do is to make test makers rich. And they're doing very well at that. In terms of success, that is going quite well. So I've passed around a petition that is based on the Texas petition, where 1,200 superintendents and school boards have signed it. And if you would like to sign it, we will give it to all of your elected officials. So thank you. So a lot of times when you introduce a politician, you say, oh, he's a champion of children. And I have to say, in this case, it is really true. Congressman Raul sits on the Education and Workforce Committee, which just passed and he didn't pass it, and he can tell you about it, the No Child Left Behind resolution that then went to the full House. But he has also been a champion for middle school students, making sure that they get their fair share of Title I, and no one cares about middle school students. They're really cranky, and they have a lot of attitude, and who cares if they don't get lunch? But Congressman Grijalva is out there for them. He has also been a champion on immigration and for raising the minimum wage. Okay, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Hey, thank you, Robert. Beginning in August of 2008, there's been over 334,000 teachers laid off as a consequence of reductions in the federal budget. That's not including the support staff. That's not including people, that's not including aides. That's not including the closure of libraries, the consolidation of programs in school districts across that country that we see every day here in Tucson. 333,000 reduced nationwide. You add that to the fact that at the beginning of this last fiscal decision on the Ryan budget and sequestration, the average contribution by an average American in this country toward public education, $438 a year. When the Ryan budget is completed and that 10-year sequence for 2013 is done, that contribution will be $2,226, almost a 47% cut in average funding, and a huge drop in the investment in public education in this country. So that's the resource side of it. And the other debate, an ongoing debate, has been about testing. Both from teachers and from community. And it's been an interesting debate, and it's been a conflicting debate sometimes, even for myself, where communities that feel that they have not gotten a fair shake out of public education feel that segregated testing and testing for children, whether they're English learners or of color or poor, that subgroup needs to be tested so you can use that as a mirror against the whole system. And then you have the point of view that testing in it by itself does not tell you anything, because if testing is not used as an instrument for improvement and only as an instrument to punish, then you're not going to get anything out of this test. All you're going to get is people responding to a test, teaching to a test, and shrinking the curriculum of a given school in order to satisfy the requirement. come 2014, and AYP is a mandated issue, and see where everybody's at, I would suggest to you that even high-performing schools are going to be on that failure list.
Congressman, first of all, I would like to salute you. I feel like we do have someone who really cares for those issues, and I find it extremely important. So it gives me hope. I'm teaching at the university, and I deal a lot with freshmen, so I see exactly what happens. Transition from high school to university. And I share very deeply your concern about what to do about the education. And since we had the first question, I would like sort of to both a commentary as well as a question. I think that the major problem we have in this country with regard to education is that we do not address the real issue. We always discuss results, results, results. That's corporatization of education. Education should be a philosophical approach. How do you transform a young individual into an adult? That's a philosophical issue. Our country has forgotten this discussion. Our country has listened to the corporatization that want our schools to produce consumers. Consumers. I want young people coming from the high school who are individuals.
Good point.
So I think we need to change the discourse away from testing results to what does a school mean? What is the fundamental purpose of a school for this nation?
I used to be a high school teacher, and
What'd you teach?
Writing.
Oh, cool.
So we had a student pass out at school one day, and it turned out it was because she hadn't eaten in 2 days. So I tell you that to sort of preface my question, which is what are we doing to help education outside of schools?
Oh man, it's all interconnected. We're just talking about education. Everything that's going on right now is kind of like a weird philosophy the Republican majority has, and particularly the extremist part of that majority have. It's kind of like a social Darwin theory, that it's survival of the fittest. And whoever does it, that's just nature taking care of itself. You got kids coming in with a variety of needs, circumstances, challenges, and they bring it to school.
Here's my concern. I look at these bills, and I look at the party that I've been a part of for, all my life. And a lot of the Democrat stuff is as bad or worse as the Republican bills. Tom Harkin's bill has a bill that to get Title II money, those students have to do well on the test. That's part of his, and another thing, just let me mention Rahm Emanuel, closing down schools with over 90% free and reduced lunch kids and African Americans. What can we do to take our party back?
I've been teaching for a number of years, and I have to tell you, I actually love teaching. I hate the state of education. It's disgusting to look around and see, as you were saying, it's so results-oriented, as so many of us have kind of recognized. We've taken the emphasis away from the process. Does the student enjoy education? Do they look forward to getting more education? Are we providing them more options so that they can be as successful in as many endeavors as they want to be? And that, to me, is the true measure of a child's education, our success rate in public education. And
A teacher once told me, "How do you measure in a kid that I was able to give him some hunger for knowledge? You can't measure it, but he has it."
it's hard to quantify.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something at the beginning of your talk about how one of the most offensive things about No Child Left Behind was the marginalization of the role of the teacher. And that's partly true, but I also think more offensive is what's more offensive is the actual institutionalization of segregation, whether it's along color lines, whether it's along zip code, or whether it's along economic, haves and have-nots. Because the majority of those politicians who are legislating on public education send their children to private schools. So they really don't know what's going on in the vast majority of public school classrooms. And that's one of the most disheartening things to me, is because when they're legislating, their children aren't being tested, but they're legislating for other children, other people's children to be tested.
Yeah,
And the one question I have is,
that's a good point.
what's the legislative takeaway from this? Because essentially, if that's the guise of No Child Left Behind, and a race to the top really isn't much of a change from that, where does that leave us?
The point you made about that you know, education is the greatest poverty eliminator, he said it, in the country, and we're not using it effectively. The thing you said about teachers, it reminds me, all the way up to about 4th grade at Liberty Elementary, we were all fearful of getting in 5th grade this teacher named Mrs. Rife. I mean, like fear. And I got her. And I remember she told me, you know, Raul, you're not dumb, you're just lazy. And I thought I knew how to read. I thought my English was as good as it could be. And Mrs. Rife spent a considerable amount of time with me and with 5 or 6 others in the class. And suddenly, you know, when that moment happens that you can not only read but comprehend, my God, it's like, what happened here? And I've always thanked her. I don't know why, but she did. And so I got elected to the school board, right? And she calls me up. She goes, Raul, can you have tea and pie with me at Caro's on Campbell? Yes, Mrs. Rife, what the hell are you going to say? And so there I go for tea and pie. We had a wonderful discussion. She told me how proud I was, how I enunciate my English so well. You know, it was patronizing, but it was necessary, you know. And then she says to me, and I hear what you're telling, because, you know, I just gotten elected. I'm 22 years old, and I'm just raving against all the gods and everybody. And then she goes, and I hear you, and I've always remembered this. She goes, you know, Raul, you don't have to be shrill to be heard. What a genius this woman was, you know? And to end the story, she passes, okay? And they have, at Brings, they have the viewing. And so I went. There was 6 of us from different times at that Liberty Elementary that showed up independent of each other, with no one organizing it, to pay their respects. I think that's pretty, you know, that's the kind of stuff that I think moments in education get lost, and one person to one person influence, and we constrict it, make it market driven, make it test driven, marginalize the teacher. You take away the ability to make that weird human connection that occurs in education every once in a while.